good to be here. Good to see many of the faces from this morning. What I want you to do right now is get with a partner. Get a partner. Someone close to you.
Sure.
Okay, here's what I want you to do. If you have your attention, please, here's what I want you to do. First thing is tell your partner why you have chosen Adler's theory, if you're an Adlerian, why you've chosen Adler's theory. What is it that you like best about Adler? A question that was asked me by some students. What do you like best about Adler? Okay? Then the second question I want you to talk about is if Adler was taken off the table and you could not be an Adlerian, which two theories, you can have two, which two theories would you choose to be your guiding theory? Okay, you understand? What do you like? Why are you an Adlerian? And then if Adler was taken off the table for you, which two theories would you choose and why? Go. Okay.
All right. So I don't think everything else is So what if I got here and learned more about
No, it's fine. It's different now.
I like it.
What do you like about it?
So I really like
Non-deterministic.
probably what I really like.
I like it.
And then I talked to her.
So she has explained to you. Yeah. Okay. All right, that makes sense. So you at least had an understanding for you. Okay. Well,
I don't know if it was, I think it was
now that I'm 18, like which one would I be involved in?
Okay, let me have your attention, please. Just a couple of folks to share Why Adler? Anybody willing to share? Yes.
I believe Adler's approach to looking at the person as a whole, based off of childhood experiences, life experiences, relationships, current stressors, previous stressors, he looks at everything as a whole, and I think that's critical to understanding why we're what we do today.
So Adler's holistic theory was really attractive for you. Maslow in 1970 said that he believes that Adler's holism, he said every year Adler becomes more and more correct to me. And it was largely because of the holism. Somebody else? Sue?
I like it because it's a way to live and it's can be applied in any and all areas of life, not just counseling, but anywhere you go, you can apply Adlerian psychology.
So it's
In
the
business,
philosophy of life.
parents,
Right.
yes,
Yeah.
anything.
Adler made the comment one time that individual psychology makes good religion if you're so unfortunate not to have one of your own. Someone else? Yes.
I like the positive psychology component, especially with this whole positive psychology movement that thinks
Yeah.
that they created it.
Adler
Just
was
that,
the first positive psychologist and
yeah,
the first growth-oriented.
and the movement-oriented
Right.
component of trust the tongue in the shoe, not the tongue in the mouth.
Right. Yeah. Adler was very emphasized on trust-only movement. You know, watch the tongue of the shoe rather than the tongue in the mouth. I guess another way you can say it, by their fruits you will know them. How fruity they are. Richard?
I have a strong streak of American pragmatism in me. What I like about Adlerian theory is there's no theory for theory's sake. All of it is aimed at application in the real world
Yeah.
and applies to real problems.
It's a real pragmatic approach, and there are several articles that address the points of resonance between Adler and William James, and Adler and Dewey, the educational reformer. Both of them were pragmatists. So I totally get that. Thanks. One more. I guess we won't have one more. So just throw out some theories that if Adler was taken off the table, what other ones would work for you? Solution focused. Narrative. Narrative. Existential. Dialectical behavior therapy. Systems.
Transactional analysis.
Right. In fact, Eric Burns said Adler was the first script analyst.
Yeah.
So it's good that many of you said solution focused and narrative, because I don't know if y'all did that for my benefit. If you did, thank you. Because the wonderful segue into reflecting as if, because reflecting as if is an integration of Adler and the constructivist/social constructivist approach. We'll talk a little bit about constructivism and constructivist approach. All right. So, as we've talked about before, Adlerian psychology is an integration of cognitive, systemic, existential/humanistic systems and constructivist or constructive. I mean, constructive is like an umbrella or rubric under which you have the cognitive constructivists, George Kelly, Mike Mahoney, Robert Niemeyer, and the like, Guido and Liotti, the Italian, to the social constructionists, Michael White and Dave Epstein, Friedman and Combs are narrative therapists, solution focused, DeShazer, and Kim Berg, and so forth. I call that constructive therapies. And Adler is situated in the middle between those two, as we talked about this morning. He emphasizes that that knowledge is socially embedded and relationally distributed, but he does not empty the self. And so therefore, there is a sense of personal agency, but it's understood that knowledge is socially embedded and relationally distributed. So therefore, we're able to draw from all the constructivist approaches, both the cognitively oriented ones, cognitive-orientedly ones. I'm not saying that right. The cognitive ones, let's just leave off the oriented, and the socio-constructionists. So anyway, Adler's theory remarkably resembles many contemporary cognitive constructivist approaches, and it contains many tenets that resonate from constructivist and social constructivist perspective. As I said, epistemology, how we know, and the social embedded and relationally distributed nature of human knowledge, Adler and the constructivists are very, very similar. The clinical practice characteristics, both Adler and the constructive therapies are relational focused, they're optimistic, present and future oriented, and they emphasize client strengths, assets, and abilities. And also many interventions discussed in the constructive therapy literature are either similar to or congruent with ones in the Adlerian therapy. In fact, they often use the very same language Adler and Adlerians have used, although they don't mention Adler and Adlerian or individual psychology. So given all these similarities, it's not surprising to see significant opportunities for technical integration between Adler and the other approaches. So I'm going to show you some of the ideas that I was looking at, basically questions from solution focus and narrative therapy, that I was looking at as I was beginning to formulate the reflecting as if process. From solution focus, these questions, pre-session change question, when clients finally decide to do something different, according to solution focus folks, that stuff is already starting to happen. It's a clinical phrase, stuff. Stuff is starting to happen. You'll see that in a lot of the really highbrow clinical books. So a person decides, okay, I got to do something, so they call a counselor. And so the question then is, between when you call to make the appointment and your arrival here today, have you made any movement toward a solution to your problem? The premise being is the fact that they're actually doing something gets the ball going, and some movement may have already occurred. They might even argue that the fact that they decided to make the call was movement forward. And then they follow that up with, if movement has occurred, what do you need to do to keep this going? So you got started by calling. What next? Then they have the miracle question. And as I said before, the miracle question is very, very similar to Adler's The Question, even though solution-focused people have not given Adler any credit for developing the question. Now they say the miracle question. I personally don't like the term miracle, as I talked about this morning, because in my experience, a lot of times clients will give non-plausible, non-doable responses. Adler's way of saying it, how would your life be different if you no longer had this problem, typically results in more plausible, more doable responses. But nonetheless, this is how solution focus asks the question. Suppose tonight when you were asleep, a miracle happens and the problem is solved. When you awake in the morning, what will be different in your life that will let you know that the miracle occurred and the problem is solved? Then you would follow up with the first sign question. What will be the first indication that the problem is gone or that you're headed in the right direction? So miracles occurred. How will you know? What will be the first thing that will make you aware that it's miraculously disappeared, or that you're headed that direction? Maybe the miracle has not completely occurred, but you're moving in the right direction. And then again, you can follow that up with, what do you need to do to start implementing some of this? Not all, but some. Okay? A variation of the miracle question is the crystal ball. I really like this one, using this one with kids, but also with adults. Milton Erickson used to use what he called the crystal ball technique. And Erickson was formulation of the crystal ball form of the question is, imagine that there's a crystal ball sitting in front of you. This is a special kind of crystal ball. It's one that lets you see yourself in the future. Now peer into the crystal ball. Notice that you can see the kind of future that you want for yourself, the kind of future where things work out for you. As you look into this crystal ball, what does that future you want look like? Okay? Now that sounds very similar in some respects. A friend of mine, Bob Bolding, who was William Glasser's, you could say his chief disciple, and has really helped advance reality therapy. Bob Bolding says that the miracle question looks a lot like what does your quality world look like? They talk about pictures in your head, the quality world. What would that look like? What would you like for to happen? And so Bolding sees a lot of solution-focused therapy has borrowed things from reality therapy, just like Adlerian's things that they borrowed it from Adler. I personally had told him that reality therapy borrowed a lot of stuff from Adler, so the fact that there's solution-focused stuff in reality therapy makes sense to me because reality therapy got it from Adler too. I'm sure that wouldn't please him to hear me say that. And hopefully he's not listening. So, exception finding questions. These questions look for times when the solution has already occurred. And there are two types. One, are there times when the problem does not occur? And how are things different? What's different about it? Are there times even now when some of the solution, even a small part, is already occurring? Scaling questions. I love scaling questions. You can use numbers, percentages, etc. on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 to 100. And you can ask these questions for myriad reasons. How committed are you to solving the problem? If I were to talk to your friend or your child or what have you, how would he or she answer as to how committed you are? What will this person need to see you do for him or her to get the idea that you've moved up the scale, perhaps from a 3 or a 4? And then with children, sometimes they might have a difficulty with 1 to 10 or 1% to 100%, but they get thermometers and they get the scales with happy faces, like 1 would be an unhappy face, and a 5 might be a neutral face, and a 10 would be a really happy face. Or a thermometer, you're at 20 on the thermometer, what do you need to get to 30? They tend to get that more than they perhaps get numbers. Scaling questions, as I said, are very adaptable to information you want or need to know in counseling. For example, assessment and progress evaluations. How motivated are you to change? Scale of 1 to 10. How hopeful that you can change? 1 to 10. How ready are you to stop coming to counseling? If you're at a point where you think the client's ready for termination, you can ask a scaling question. How ready are you to stop coming to counseling? Well, sometimes the problem will not go away. Miracle's not going to happen. Sometimes you say, how would your life be different if you no longer had this problem? Well, sometimes the problem will not go away. If it's a chronic situation, like a terminal illness, permanent disability, HIV and AIDS, the problem will not go away. So then you move from the question or the miracle question to coping questions. And you ask, how are you able to cope? And these questions move from simple things like, how are you able to get up in the morning? How are you able to get out of bed? And because typically what they'll say is, I can't do anything. And I'll say, were you able to get up this morning? Yeah, I got up. How are you able to do that? With all that you've got going on, how are you able to get out of bed? Because they get really discouraged, and these questions can help help them understand that they're actually doing more than they give themselves credit for. And you can make it more complex too. How'd you get to the appointment? You had to get dressed, you had to find a way to get here. How were you able to get to the appointment? And then you can show them and be encouraging, cheerleading for them that they're able to do more than they realize as they're coping with the situation that is chronic. So that's solution-focused questions that I found really interesting. I thought, I want to use those in my Adlerian work. Some other things that I use from constructivist therapies. These are from Michael Mahoney and Robert Niemeyer's form of constructivism. And analogizing, unpacking meanings and metaphors. Personal and novel meanings often have difficulty in standard discourse. And a staple intervention used by constructivists is called analogizing. And they describe it as reflecting upon an image or metaphor, sometimes suggested by counselors, sometimes suggested by clients. I personally think it's more important to go with a client's metaphor because it's in the language of the client rather than you giving a metaphor to them. And so you use these to stretch the capacity of language. Clients and counselors are then able to collaboratively unpack meanings that may have been out of awareness or elusive in articulation. For example, a client might say, if I could only find the missing pieces to my life, how would you respond to that?
What are the missing pieces?
What are the missing pieces?
What color are they?
What color are they?
Where do you think you might have lost those?
Where might you have lost them?
Tell me more about them.
Tell me more about them. How will your life be different when you're able to put the missing pieces into the puzzle? That's one I do.
What does the whole puzzle look like?
I'm sorry?
What does the whole puzzle look like?
Okay. When you get to find the missing pieces, because you want to use the metaphor, when you find the missing pieces, what will the puzzle look like? That's good. Okay? Get the idea? So let's do another one. Client metaphor. Since my wife asks for a separation, I feel this curtain of rejection whenever I'm in her presence.
How heavy is the curtain?
How heavy is the curtain? Okay.
Can you see through the curtain?
Can you see through the curtain? Now that's interesting.
How drawn is the curtain?
How drawn is the curtain?
Can you see any way to pull the curtain back?
Is there any way you can see to pull the curtain back? And that gets to finding a solution. So good. Good job. Another one's called Moviola. And it's developed by one of the Italians. I think it's Giordani. But he talks about using the language of cinema, because people are familiar with it. You reconstruct with the client the succession of scenes in the event under investigation. And as they're, like you're in the editing room, you have the client pan the succession of scenes. You go back and forth in slow motion, and you zoom in on a singularly important scene and unpack its meaning. You can do this with early recollections from an Adler perspective, which is really cool too. Next, the client's encouraged to zoom out and reflect on this scene, and it helps create dialogical space so the client can think outside of the problem. The zooming out process does. The client then zooms back into the scene that has been enriched by the dialogue. The scene begins to mutate, taking on new connotations and permitting the emergence of other details in the scene. And basically, it's a technique that helps for perceptual alternatives or meaning reconstruction. Right? Then solution focus and narrative therapy were the two biggest influences on me developing reflecting as if, integrating those questions into an Adlerian therapy perspective. So here's some things that questions that I like from narrative therapy. The externalization questions. Dreikers, a long time ago, said the problem is the problem, the client is not the problem. And Michael White and Dave Epstein in their narrative therapy agree with that. And so they'll ask questions. The client will come in and say, you know, I'm a depressed person, or I'm an angry person, or whatever it is. Whatever the client names the problem. You don't name the problem. You and the client come up with a name for it. So the client comes in and they say, I'm a depressed person. And so they externalize it by saying, okay, what are we going to call the problem? The problem's depression. You're not the problem. The problem's the problem. What does depression whisper in your ear? What does blame have you doing to each other if you work with a couple? What conclusions about your relationship have you drawn because of anger's influence? Does that make sense? So it's a really cool way of separating a person who comes in and they see themselves fused with the problem, and they can't see themselves outside of the problem. Narrative therapy talks about people have problem-saturated narratives, and they cannot see themselves apart from the problem. So maybe the problem, on a scale of 1 to 10, the problem encompasses 1 to 4 of their life. But 5 to 10 are things that are good, that could be used to bring to bear to help find solutions or preferred outcomes to the problem. But the client can't see 5 to 10 because they're living a problem-saturated narrative. All they can see is 1 to 4. Does that make sense? Okay. So, another question you asked, this unique outcome questions are very similar to exception questions from solution-focused group therapy. And so, can you remember a time when anger tried to take you over but you didn't let it, or whatever the externalized problem is? What was that like for you? How did you do it? Similar to the miracle question, in solution-focused, unique outcome questions can also be asked in future tense. What would be different when you're standing up to anger or blame or what have you? So you can see a lot of similarity in some respects to questions from solution-focused and narrative therapy. Preface questions. After you've gotten the client to talk about the times when the unique outcomes are occurring and things are different, then you ask, okay, when times are different, and it is a preferred or a way that's different, is it the way that you prefer? Is it indeed better? And so was the way you handle the situation better or worse? Was this more or less the way you'd like things to be? Was it a positive development or a negative development? Because just because it was different, it might have been worse than the way. So you want to make sure this is the way they would like for it to be before you start investigating the unique outcome or the exception. So then you start asking this. They got this landscape of action questions and landscape of consciousness questions they got from Jerome Bruner, the educational cognitive psychologist. And so landscape of action questions, when they're discovering an event, thought, action, or belief that does not fit with the dominant problem story, they explore in specific detail the unique outcome. And these questions begin with who, what, where, when, so the particulars of the unique outcome can be explored in detail. Where were you when this happened? When did it happen? How long? What happened just before and after? How did you prepare yourself? Did you tell anyone about it? If so, what did he or she say? Have you done this before? What steps led up to it? You get as much detail about the unique outcome or the exception as possible so that you can bring to bear the uniqueness of that time onto the problem and create an alternative story. Then you have landscape of consciousness or landscape of meaning questions. Now, these questions invite clients to reflect on the meanings of the events or unique outcomes they describe. An exploration is engaged into what the unique outcome means in terms of the person's desires, intentions, preference, beliefs, hopes, personal qualities, values, strengths, commitments, plans, characteristics, abilities, and purposes. So you ask questions like, what do you think this says about the hopes you have for your relationship with your daughter? What personal values does the choice you have made demonstrate? Remember, this is about the preferred outcomes. When the problem is not a problem, it communicates something about what they would really like their life to be. When that happened, how would you describe your relationship with your wife at that time? What did it take in order to do that at this point in your life? When you took this step, what were you intending for your life? What does it say about you as a person that you would do this? Can you help me understand more about what that says you believe in or value? What do you think that says about your abilities, skills, or knowledges? All right, well, those are the questions that I was looking at when I was starting to think about reflecting as if. Let me see what time it is. Okay. I've got to fix this computer. Give me just 1 second. I don't know why I keep doing this. All right. Now we're going to move from this one to there we go. All right. Now we've talked about this slide already, so we're going to move on, but this is the slide we talked about earlier about common ground between Adler and constructive therapy, right? Nod your head. Thank you. Now, acting is as if and acting as if. One area that in specific, there's tremendous common ground between Adler and constructivism is both of them talk about the value in using the as-if quality of human experience in counseling and psychotherapy. In fact, constructivists often use the Adlerian technique nomenclature, acting as if, but seldom mention Adler's pioneering work. Acting as if affords a client the opportunity to enact alternative preferred outcomes and possibly restoring oppressive aspects of his or her personal meta-narrative, or what we call style of life in Adlerian parlance. Now, you notice what I did. I just explained the Adlerian technique in narrative therapy language because it resonates. What we call style of life, they call meta-narrative. What we call style of life convictions, cognitive behavioral therapy calls core schema. It's all about meaning making, regardless of the epistemology that they're talking about. So, I'm working with clients. You're familiar with, let me go ahead and explain the acting as if technique. A client comes in, they say, I wish I was a more confident person. And you say that, well, this week I want you to go out and act as if you're a more confident person and come back and let's talk about it, okay? And it's a way of, you tell them that they're acting and that it helps to diffuse any resistance they might have because they're acting and it gives them some freedom to try things on, okay? Does that make sense? Okay. That's the traditional approach. Then they come back, it's a low threat activity, and they typically feel good about it, and they're able to consider other things that they can do to act as if they're the person they would like to be. I love that technique, except when I don't. Okay? And what I mean by that is, it's counterindicated for some clients. For example, if you have a client who has frontal lobe difficulties, and so consequently they're highly impulsive. Okay, your frontal lobe is what keeps you from going to work in your underwear and licking strangers. So I stole that from Brandon Hunt, who teaches in Georgia. That's one of her jokes. I love that joke. So with a person who's very impulsive for whatever reason, addicts, people that struggle with addictions are sometimes very impulsive. You have frontal lobe capacities. And so he said, I wish I was a real man. Well, if he's real impulsive, you said, well, go out and act as if you're a real man this week and come back. Well, he might go to a bar and pick a fight and get beat up. Well, that's not good for your client. It gets you sued. So it's counterindicated for that client. It's also some clients I had when I would try acting as if, they were real reticent to enact the reflecting as if process. They needed more structure. And just to say, if you go out and act as if, they wouldn't follow through. And so I thought, okay, how can I use the acting as if idea? What can I do to make it where it's more amenable when working with people that might be impulsive or that need more structure? And that's when I stumbled across the idea of reflecting as if, which is an integration of Adlerian and constructivist counseling and psychotherapy ideas. It's not a technique, it's a process. It expands the Adlerian technique by having clinicians ask clients to take a reflective step back before they step forward to act as if. It encourages clients to reflect on how they would be different if they were acting as if they were the person they'd like to be, or they were more confident, or they were what have you. By using reflective questions, counselors can help clients construct perceptual alternatives and consider alternative behaviors toward which they may begin moving. It has 3 phases. Phase 1 uses reflective questions to assess the creativity and imagination of clients. Phase 2, the client and therapist co-construct an action plan based on the client's reflective thinking. And then in the final phase, clients implement the as-if behaviors and subsequently dialogue about the enacted experience with the therapist. So, having gone over the solution focus and narrative questions, you'll see where I got the reflective questions for phase 1 of reflecting as if. Client comes in and tells you, I wish I was different, or I wish I was this or that. And later on, we're going to watch a video of me working with a client, and I'll be using reflecting as if with her. So, you ask questions like, if you were acting as if you were the person you'd like to be, how would you be acting differently? If I were watching a videotape of your life, what would be different? If a good friend would see you in several months from now, and you were more like the person you desire to be, or your situation had significantly improved, what would this person see you doing differently? What might be some initial indicators that would demonstrate you're headed in the right direction? So you ask these questions, they brainstorm, and you don't put any parameters on what they give you. Just write them down, and then you go to phase 2. After the reflective questioning phase, which is phase 1, you do a plausibility check. Well, I'm a little ahead of myself. You and the client co-construct a list of as-if behaviors that are indicative of how the client will act as he or she moves toward his or her desired goals. You got to move from general to specific, and what I mean by that is when you say, okay, if you were acting as if you were the person you'd like to be, what would that look like? What would I see you doing differently? They would say, well, I'd be more happy. Okay? Too general. It's great, okay? So then you say, rather than saying, no, what's wrong with you? It's not very empathic. What you go with what they give you, and then you say, okay, and if you were more the person you want to be and you were happy, what would you be doing? And then you add things like, well, if you were happy and I could see you being happy, what would I see you doing specifically, behaviorally? If I was watching a movie, how would I see you doing that? It gets them from general to specific. You understand what I'm saying, right? Okay. So after developing the list of behaviors, you do a plausibility check. Make sure that what they say is something that is plausible, it's doable. It's not something that is impossible for them to do and would discourage them. So you do the plausibility check, then you and the client rank the as-if behaviors from least difficult to most difficult. And so the client's ready to begin enacting the behaviors. So prior to the next counseling session, the client selects 1 or 2 of the least difficult behaviors to begin enacting. You've got a list from 1 to 10, that maybe they'll take the first 2 and do enact for the coming week. And so you start off with the least difficult behaviors. Why? Don't read it. Why do you start off with the least success? Why does it matter if they're having success?
Success motivates.
That's right. Success breeds success. It tends to, it's encouraging for them. It can increase their perceived self-efficacy. Having some success, and it increases their motivation to courageously engage in more difficult tasks on their list. So in the following sessions, you and the client discuss the enactment of the as-if behaviors selected for the previous week. It often helps the behaviors often help clients perceive themselves, others in the world differently. And again, like I said this morning, a lot of secondary source textbooks say that Adler is an insight-oriented therapy, and insight has to occur before change occurs. and that's not true. Adlerians consistently use behavior-oriented techniques to get clients to do things different, understanding that behavior change often produces insight. So that's here, reflecting as if is a very behavioral process. And so clients, and you'll see on the video when I show you later, she has some ahas in the course of the reflecting as if process. And so it will help them understand themselves and others in the world differently. We Adlerians regularly use action-oriented procedures to facilitate perceptual alternatives. And the Adlerian therapeutic process, very similar to many constructivist therapies, seeks to change the client's doing, viewing, and invoke or access their strengths, assets, and abilities. Doing and viewing, what does that sound like? What theory does that sound like? Viewing and doing. Cognitive behavioral? But also it sounds like narrative. But actually, the viewing and doing and invoking strengths, assets, and abilities is a line from a solution-focused textbook. But Adlerians also do that, and cognitive behaviorists do it, and narrative therapists do it. But who said it first? Adler did. So as a client attempts a more difficult task on his or her as-if behavior list, it's crucial that we use encouragement to help him or her frame success in terms of effort and potentially small amounts of successful movement. We are such an outcome-focused culture. You know, we got to get there, we got to get there, we got to get there, rather than saying, hey, I'm making progress. And we got to help clients understand that they should feel good about the progress they're making. Just because they haven't got there yet, well, in a real well, how do I want to word this? None of us are there yet. We're all in process. We all have to have the courage to be imperfect, as Stryker said. So it's important to help clients frame success in smaller amounts of movement. They may be more patient and find process less frustrating if they understand success in terms of effort and incremental growth rather than simply final outcomes. And so, you know, encouragement is crucial throughout the counseling process. And I said this morning, encouragement is crucial for human growth and development. We also have an encouragement-focused way of being. But it's particularly important in phase 3, where clients can get discouraged as the problems become more difficult to accomplish, or as the tasks become more difficult to accomplish. They need more encouragement. So let's talk a little bit about encouragement. We this morning, but in case anybody came in that didn't hear this morning, encouragement is often misunderstood as an Adlerian technique. It's not a technique. It's a way of being with others. It's an attitude and a way of being. And Adlerians view counseling as a process of encouragement. Adlerian tactics include accepting clients unconditionally without judgment, demonstrating concern for clients through active listening, respect, and empathy, focus on client strengths, assets, and ability, including identifying and drawing upon past successes, and communicating confidence in the same. Helping clients distinguish between what they do and who they are, the deed versus the doer. And here's the one we were just talking about. Focus on clients' efforts and progress, communicating affirmation and appreciation to clients. Helping clients generate perceptual alternatives for discouraging fictional beliefs and oppressive narratives, and helping clients see the humor in life experiences. Now, what if a client has difficulty? You're working with a client, you're using REI, and the client's having a hard time coming up with the as-if behaviors that they would enact. Well, then you can use a thing that is called using imaginary reflecting teams. Now, when clients are immersed in their problems, they sometimes have a hard time with the RA process. They struggle to see beyond the problem and are unable to create perceptual alternatives or alternative behaviors. Narrative therapists call this problem-saturated narrative. These clients need help stepping out or stepping away from the problem so they can create a place for reflection. and therefore develop preferred alternative meetings. And imaginary reflecting teams can help clients step out and step away from the problem and create dialogical space for reflecting as if. So, when clients have difficulty responding to reflective questions, you can invite imaginary team members into the session. And how you would do this, you begin, you ask the client, think of one or more persons you respect and view as wise, and then you create a list of team members. To amplify the team member imagery, you can provide chairs, like in Gestalt therapy. You can have several chairs. Maybe they mention 3 people they trust and view as wise to be on the imaginary team, and so you can have 3 chairs lined up, and I'll put names on the chairs: Bob and Linda and Sid. Okay, and so you got Bob, Linda, and Sid, and they're the imaginary team members. Then you can choose to put, like I said, you can choose to put name tags on there for identification purposes, and I do, because I'm getting old and I can't remember what the client told me. I keep waiting for somebody to go, oh, you're not old. Kind of like the person that they walked up to me one time and they said, I said, man, I just feel so old and fat, and they go, you're not fat. Well, thanks. Say, and old. Once the team's created, once you and the client have co-constructed the imaginary reflecting team, then you can call on the team members for assistance by asking client questions from the reflective questions we talked about earlier. You can say, suppose you're talking to this person or a couple in the future after you make significant progress in overcoming the problem. What changes would he or she or they say are evident? So the person's not thinking about from themselves, they're thinking what Bob or Linda or Sid would say, okay? What specifically would he or she say is different about you? What specific steps would he or she identify that you took to make a significant change? It's a future question. What suggestions might he or she make for responding constructively to the problem? It's called a suggestion question. What might he or she say you do when anger attacks you? It's an externalization question. What would he or she describe when the times when the problem isn't a problem for you? Exception question. Or how would he or she describe what you do when you're acting in the ways you prefer? It's a unique outcome question. And you could have follow-up questions for exception and unique outcome questions. How would he or she explain your ability to accomplish this great success? Accomplish another coping question. How will he or she know you two are starting to move in the direction you want to move as a couple? Initial movement question. Now, the point being is it really Bob, Linda, and Sid that's answering the question? No. It's a projection of the client's solutions onto the imaginary team member. So you're accessing client strengths, assets, and ability by circumventing the problem-saturated narrative. They can't see outside the problem, so they can't come up with a solution. But they do have solutions within them. But they're having a hard time coming up with them because all they can see is the problem. By having imaginary team members come in, then it creates psychological space for them to be able to, for their solutions and the unique outcomes to emerge. Does that make sense to you? Okay. If it doesn't, let me know, because I can explain another way, or I can make something up, you know. We can work from it. So, after the team has been heard, the therapist can proceed to phase 2 of the RA process, just like you did when you're working with them without the imaginary reflective team. And you help the client develop a list of as-if behaviors and rate them in terms of difficulty. You do the plausibility check just like you did before. And you pick you have the list of as-if behaviors, and then you rank them in terms of difficulty. Again, if the clients are having difficulty ranking the behaviors, you can invite the imaginary team members to participate. Well, how do you think Bob would rank these behaviors? What do you think Linda would say? Is Bob's accurate? And Sid, or you could just use one of them. But anyway, they're creating the ranking of the behaviors, but they're able to do it outside of the problem. So after the behaviors have been ranked, the acting as if enactment may begin just like before. So the next and subsequent sessions, you and the client discuss the enactment of the as-if behaviors and any resulting conceptual alternatives or enactment difficulties. You can bring the imaginary team members back in to discuss areas of improvement or areas for growth. The use of imaginary team members is, you can use them almost for anything. They're very, very useful. Types of questions offered as examples of phase 1 are easily adapted for use in subsequent phases. And as the client attempts more difficult tasks, the imaginary team members can be invited to positively reflect on the efforts, forward movement, and provide encouragement when progress moves slower. You can use imaginary team members to have a person encourage themselves. It's pretty cool. Now, how many of y'all work with children? You can probably see how this might be difficult with younger children, because they might have a hard time coming up with initially. But if they draw it, many times they can talk about it. After they draw it, then they're able to talk about it. So a play therapist friend of mine and I wrote a paper on using reflecting as if by using children's drawings. We'll talk about this and then we'll take a break. So, key concepts of utilizing the acting as if technique with children include the counselor being encouraging, empathic, understanding, and the counselor must emphasize to the client they're only pretending or only acting, okay, when you're using as if with the client. When you use as if drawings with clients and you're using it for reflecting as if, you ask the child to draw a picture based on reflective questions like, if you were the person you'd like to be, you can say acting as if, or you can take acting as if out if you think the child's not developmentally, at a developmental level where the abstract as if might be appropriate. Although, you know, even young children often get that. They often get the as if because they're rolling the pretend play. But that's something you can decide. So if you were acting as if you were the person you'd like to be, how would you be acting different? If I was watching a movie of your life, what would be different? And they'll draw it. They will draw how they will be different. And depending on the child's age, you might, like I said, have to simplify the questions. Step 2, once the child is finished the completed initial drawing, then the counselor will co-construct an as-if list of behaviors with the child. You'll debrief with the child the meaning of the picture and what will they be doing. The behaviors will be different. Make sure that they're doable. The child may be more comfortable drawing the list of behaviors instead of verbally telling the counselor. And after you complete the list, the child should rank the behaviors from easiest to do to hardest to do. If scaling might be hard for the child, then you do a thermometer. Again, which one of these would be low on the thermometer, which one would be high? They tend to get thermometers. When the child ranks these behaviors, the counselor will ask him or her to pick the easiest two and enact the behaviors prior to the next session. Then step 3 allows the child the opportunity to explore with you the process of acting as if, and again, children may be more comfortable using drawings to discuss how the enactment attempts went for that week. It's key for the counselor and parents to be encouraging and to frame success again in terms of the child's effort. Even small attempts are a movement in a positive direction. And parents often don't get that. They often want either or. They want the behavior to change now. And so they will say, he always does that. And then I'll ask, well, is there ever a time when he's not done it? And last week, was there a time when he didn't do that behavior? Well, Thursday, he didn't do it. So when you tell me he always does it, you're telling me he does it a lot, so he doesn't always do it. Well, that's right. So I get the parents to look at, well, there's sometimes he doesn't do it. And we look at what's different about those times. And there are ways that we can encourage your child when he's acting in a way that's more appropriate to help the family, more cooperative to the family. Okay. We've talked about taking a cab this morning, so we're going to skip over that. But remember, was anybody here today that wasn't here this morning, this afternoon? Okay. Then we'll go over it real quick. Is that okay? taking a cab is a technique I developed that integrates cognitive behavioral things with Adlerian perspective, and I use it in assessment for reflecting as if. I'll start off asking them to tell me what are some. I go through each life task. Tell me about some feelings you have about your partner and family relationships. So I guess let's stop. We'll stop for a break, 10-minute break, and then we'll come back to this. Okay? I'm going to go through the cab really quick. Taking a cab in the REA process. Taking a cab is an integration of Adlerian and cognitive behavioral. You'll recognize the ABC model from cognitive therapy, right? Activating event, belief system, consequence, both emotional and behavioral. And so I took that idea, and the thing that I use ABC a lot with clients. It will help them getting to their belief system. But it didn't get to enough context for me, because there's more to how people believe than just the individual. There's also the influence of family, and so I want to look at what they believe in terms of micro and macro systemic context. Said another way, I want them to look at it in terms of their life tasks. So I get them to talk about what are feelings they have about how things are going with their partner or family and/or family, feelings, affect, and then what are behaviors, good or bad. I don't put a label on what they do. They tell me. Usually, if they're coming there for counseling, it's typically they're going to tell me about difficult behaviors and feelings. Okay, and then I ask them to tell me about beliefs that are influencing. I don't say determine, but their beliefs that influence how they feel and what they do. And you see the ABC model in cognitive therapy. And as I told people this morning, well, then why didn't you just do ABC? Well, I want a cute name for my technique. And I couldn't do ABC because it's already been done. So I said, okay, CAB, taking a cab. And I was real proud of myself. I thought I was immensely clever. Others, obviously not so much. But so anyway, you're taking a cab through the life task. So you're looking at cognition, affect, and behavior through love and family, friends and society, work and school, your relationship with yourself. Kierkegaard talks about the self's relationship with the self. And Adler had to have read Kierkegaard sometime. I've never found Adler mention Kierkegaard. But Adler's notion of self relationship with the self that he intimates, and that Mossack and Dreikers and Mossack fleshed it out. And Adler's process of development of social interest looks remarkably similar to Kierkegaard's stages on life's way. And Adler talks about the diminished social interest, where you only care about yourself, and then the middle range social interest is you care about other people and you do the right kinds of things. And then at the highest level is at a cosmic level. It's transcendent. Well, Kierkegaard's stages on life way are the aesthetic stage, the ethical stage. So aesthetic stage is basically, whatever feels good for me. The ethical stage is where you're doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do. And then what he calls the religious stage, which is where a person is at a level of spirituality, religion or spirituality. And so you could say, in a sense, being God or the universe, or however you understand your spirituality. But there's a parallel between Adler and Kierkegaard. And one of these days I'm going to write a paper on that. But, I got a list of papers I want to write. But, I have this many papers and about this much time. You probably can relate to that. Okay, so you understand the idea of CAB, or do you need more information? So anyway, you do present, do all the present ones first. Then after you have all the present ones, then you go back and say, okay, now, how would you like your feeling to be? What would be the preferred feeling in your love or family relationship? What would be the behaviors you would prefer to be happening? And what are the beliefs you would have that would more likely produce these feelings and that behavior. Okay, you do that with each one. Make sense? And then you do that for preferred. And it gives you a wealth of information. I did an assessment. It gives you a wealth of information about people's thinking, feeling, and believing in the context of their life tasks and family system and systems outside of the family as well. All right, now, you could say, well, this all sounds well and good, reflecting as if sounds interesting, but I work in an environment that requires me to use evidence-based practices. And, you know, a lot of Adlerian stuff doesn't have evidence-based practice, so how could I use it? Well, I'm glad you said that. Because John and Rita Summers Flanagan, in their 2012 Theories of Counseling and Psychotherapy book, new edition, recently reviewed my writings. I've written several papers, there's about 5 journal articles and an article for Counseling Today, which is a professional magazine of the American Counseling Association, on reflecting self. I think there's 6 articles now. Did one on bullying, a recent one that just came out on using RAI with people who bully. And it's in a thing called Vistas, which is published by the American Counseling Association. There's one in Imaginary Reflecting Teams, is in the Journal of Constructivist Psychology. There's several in the Adlerian Journal of Individual Psychology. So anyway, but they looked at the writings and they said that it is evidence-based practice. Here's how you can explain it. RA procedure is simple and straightforward. It's also a good example of not only the theoretical compatibility of Adlerian approaches, but also their empirical base. Specifically, RAI employs several evidence-based techniques, including collaborative goal setting, collaborative brainstorming as a step in problem solving, a focus on concrete and measurable behaviors, and concrete behavioral planning. So if you're working in an environment where you have to use evidence-based practices, and you want to use reflecting as if, then you can say, well, yeah, I use collaborative goal setting with this client, collaborative brainstorming, focus on concrete and measurable goals, and concrete behavioral planning. And you can use reflecting as if, because it has those evidence-based practices. You don't have to write all this down. I'm going to send my PowerPoint slides to your president, and I'm not sure how he's going to make that available to you, but you can send it if you have a mass email to school, you can send it down. Sounds kind of like a Catholic email, doesn't it? A mass email? Like the little boy who thought God's name was Andy. The teacher said, Sunday school teacher said, Andy? Where did you get Andy? You know, it's in the song we sing. What song? You know, Real Friday stands up, and he walks with me, and he talks with me, and he tells me I am his own. So God's name was Andy. Or the kid who thought God's name was Howard. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. Or the little kid who was getting near Christmas time, and the teacher asked the children to draw, the Catholic school asked the teacher to draw pictures of the nativity scene, or another Christmas picture, whatever they want to draw. And so one little boy was really proud of his picture. He took it up there, showed it to the teacher, and she said, oh, you worked really hard on this, lots of colors. There's Mary and Joseph, the baby, but who's this fat guy over here? He goes, oh, that's Round John Virgin. Round John Virgin. Another little girl brought her picture of of the reindeer. So she goes, oh, this worked hard on this one too. You used browns and then lots of white. But I don't remember a reindeer named Olive. She goes, oh, sure, you remember Olive, the other reindeer that wouldn't let Rudolph play? I love how little kids hear things. It cracks me up. All right. There's lots of ways you can use reflecting as if besides the way that I've talked about. Anybody in here do Sandtray? Okay. You can do reflecting as if in Sandtray. And how you do that is, instead of having them draw a picture, you have them draw how are things now, and how would draw a picture of, or create a sand tray of how life would be if you were acting as if you're the person you would like to be. And then you have them debrief it from the sand tray. It works great, except when it doesn't. No, it works great. You can use reflecting as if in group work. Anybody do group work in here? How can you see using REI in group work? Not everybody wants it.
You've got, the other people in group are the other, what would that person think? What would that person say about?
They can be the reflecting team members. And they don't have to be imaginary. Now, of course, you can't use it right away. You don't use reflecting as if in groups until you're in the working phase of group work. Because they have to have a sense of the others, and the others have to have a sense of that person before they can start being a reflecting team for them. But you're spot on. Good job. I'll give you the $5 later. You can also use reflecting as if in supervision. Say you've got a counselor that you're supervising, and they're having a hard time with the client. Okay, and so in a sense, in their work with that client, they develop a problem-saturated narrative. We use it the same way you use it with the client. If you were acting as if you were the counselor you'd like to be with this client, what would you be doing different? Or you can also, if you're doing triadic supervision, then the other people in the other person in the supervision can serve as a reflecting team member. Or you can use imaginary team members. I've used it with supervisees, and I say, tell me a couple of your classmates or a couple of counselors you really respect. That they really know their stuff, and they tell you the names, and then you use the imaginary reflecting teams, and the counselors that they name are the imaginary reflecting teams. Does that make sense? And it works great. Okay. So now we're going to watch a video of me with a client doing reflecting as if. When I send this to Dr. Dan, there's readings on here. There's also I don't want to use that one. That's the Greek word for saying it is finished. Tetelestai. So it's like I have to show off every once in a while. When you get this, you'll see readings at the end. These are reflecting as if readings. This is the article in the Counseling Today I told you about. You can click on that and it'll take you to that article. If you want to hear a podcast on reflecting as if, you can go to that site. I think you'll be able to get onto it. I'm not positive. You're not supposed to be able to get on that because you're not a member. Could you hear that? If you couldn't hear it, I'll tell you later. But if you send an email request, I'll forward you any of the RAI articles listed above. And also, I can't send you the book. Can't do that. Can't do it. Wouldn't be prudent at this time. No, I don't have enough books to send you. Also, if you want to know more about Adler and constructivist therapies, how I see Adler's relational constructivist approach, I can't send this to you, but you got a copy of it? You got your book here? That's it. I'm getting ready to do a commercial, so excuse me. This book is that first book, Adler in Therapy, Theory and Practice, is published by the American Psychological Association. Thank you, Don. And there's a section in there in chapter 2 and several other places. One chapter in section 2 talks about Adler and the cognitive therapies, or chapter 2, and then the relationship chapter talks about Adler and Rogers, and the brief therapy chapter, the individual brief therapy, talks about Adler and solution-focused brief therapy. So if you have a few discretionary funds, you might check it out. But I can't send that to you, just give you a heads up. But the others, these articles, there's a book chapter I can send to you, that article. That book chapter I can send you, and this article I can send you. All right. So let's look at the video. I'm not going to play all the video because okay. And so we're gonna as Minnie Pearl used to say in the Grand Ole Opera, we're gonna sing now. Okay? And you gotta participate. If I see you not singing, I'll come stand over you. No. This is the down once you blow your horn. Okay? Every time I make a mistake, then I think I'm not good enough. It means I don't have what it takes. If it's not perfect, it's fluff. Fallibility, fallibility, absolutely will not work for me. Worthless I will be with fallibility. Gotta do life perfectly. Upon even further reflection, for I can't see it's my job, for I can't stand imperfection, because it means I'm a slob. Fallibility, fallibility, absolutely will not work for me. Worthless I will be with fallibility, gotta do life perfectly. Oh, y'all sing well, good job. All right, this one's to my Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean. Now, Albert Ellis created songs like this, rational motive behavior therapy songs, but lots of students in my classes wouldn't want to sing them because he used a lot of bad language. He was enamored with the F word, and as well as other words. And so I said, well, I like the idea of singing songs about irrational beliefs or basic mistakes, because in a group work, I'll bring my guitar in, and the group sings them, and they, where they might not talk to me about, they may have trouble talking to me about their issues and their cognitions. We sing them, they start laughing, and I'll hear them go, oh, that's so mean. So after we finish singing, I'll say, any of y'all see yourself in any of these? Oh, and they'll name one of the songs. I said, well, tell me about how that's you. And where they might have been hesitant before, because they sang and laughed, they're more than willing to share with me. And so it's been a fun thing. It's also a good way of teaching basic mistakes or basic misperceptions, irrational beliefs, or cognitive distortions, however you want to frame it. All right, this was my Body Lies Over the Ocean. Some of you may recognize your partner in this song, so just in case. Oh, I want quick gratification. I can't stand to wait or delay. And if there's a question in your mind, you better let me have my way. Give me, oh give me what I want right now. Right now! Stop, no, you didn't do it right. You tell me right now and stomp your foot, okay? Right here on the chorus. Ready? Go. Give me, oh give me what I want right now. Right now! Good job. Give me, oh give me what I want right now. Don't ask me to tolerate frustration. It's not something that I do well. I want what I want when I want it. If it's not forthcoming, there's hell. Give me, oh give me what I want right now. Right now! Give me, oh give me what I want right now. Wait. This last verse you have to sing with a lot of pathos, a lot of pain in your voice. Ready? I cannot control my behavior. My childhood has made me this way. For I'm just a poor little victim. That's why I continually say, give me, oh give me what I want right now. Right now! Give me, oh give me what I want right now. Good job. All right, this one's to Billy Boy. It's Why Do I Choose Misery? All right. Oh, why do I choose misery, misery? Oh, why do I choose to be nauseous? 'Cause I just refuse to say I will learn a better way, and I blame it instead on being cautious. Oh, why do I keep silly thoughts, silly thoughts? Oh, why do I keep sinking thinking? 'Cause I just refuse to say I will learn a better way. I'm too lazy to keep myself from sinking. Oh, when will I be sound of mind, sound of mind? Oh, when will I be finally stable? When I do the work to stay, I have learned a better way, but I won't hold my breath until I'm able. Okay, I wrote this one for my graduate students, and for graduate students everywhere. And, a number of my graduate students have made a little card out of this one and put it in their visor. And so when they get anxious or whatever, they start singing it to themselves. It's the Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. And it's perfectionist refrain. Perfect, perfect, I must be, or I'm worthless, don't you see? I must never slip and fall. I must never fail at all. Perfect, perfect, I must be, or I'm worthless, don't you see? Anybody relate to that one? This one's a good old country music song. It's to On Top of Old Smoky. And it's got perfect country music lyrics. Not the perfect country music song, because it doesn't talk about mama or trains or getting drunk or, kind of like the David Allan Coe song. All right? Oh, sweetie, you left me. Oh, lover, you're gone. Since I've been rejected, I cannot go on. Oh, why did you leave me? What's that all about? I guess that I'm worthless, and you figured it out. I really deserve this. I know that it's true. If I only could hear why I leave me too. Okay, this one was fondly written for a client who, for convenience sake, we might say, struggled with borderline personality disorder. Okay. Why must this life be so hard, be so hard, be so hard? Why must this life be so hard? It ought not be this way. They should let me be in charge, be in charge, be in charge. They should let me be in charge of every single day. But they won't, so damn them all, damn them all, damn them all. But they won't, so damn them all, they're worthless anyway. No one seems to like me much, like me much, like me much. No one seems to like me much. What is their problem? Now this one you gotta sing in your very best Elvis Presley voice. Okay, ready? Boy, when my faith is not get my way, it's not fair when I'm where others don't do what I say. Don't they see that it's me that knows better than they? I know best, others less, but it's just the right way. Thank you very much. All right. All right, yeah, I'm a little bit of a ham, okay.
You said you've been a baby, right?
Yeah, I am. I'm kind of a blend between a firstborn and a baby, it depends on the context. If I'm where I have to be really responsible, I can step up to the plate. I prefer to be the center of attention. Make somebody go, well, duh, you wouldn't anybody. All right. These stages of change. She was ready to do something. And so this was at a phase where we were creating, using reflecting as if. You don't use reflecting as if from the get-go, typically. You build a relationship with a client, and when they're ready to do something, when they're moving beyond the preparation phase and into the working phase, then or the action phase, then reflecting as if appropriate. Similar to the phases of Adlerian counseling, the working phase, where they're ready to do something, is a reorientation, re-education. This is a reorientation, re-education process. And so she was a doc student, so I did know her to some degree, so there was some relationship there. It was a real problem, it was not scripted, and it's not been edited. There's a lot of stuff in there I would like to edit out, because sometimes I sound like Porky Pig. I left it unedited because I wanted people that are watching this to realize that it doesn't go as smooth as some of the edited videos. Some of the edited videos look like they never make mistakes. Both those are typically scripted and edited, and I didn't want that to be that way. I wanted people to see a counseling session working all with me, just like we were working with her, to have the courage to be imperfect. Okay? Now, with that being said, do you have any questions about what I did, why I did it? Any questions about using reflecting as if?
That whole process, typically when you're working with a client, how long does that, I mean, how many sessions would you actually go through with that entire, and quite obviously it would, make a difference what kind of issue or problem the client was having, but this was quite obviously would have been stretched out over quite a few sessions.
Well, possibly.
Okay.
In terms of building the action plan, I think I could do it in one session. Kind of like name that tune, I can build it in one session. But the issue though is the process doesn't, it continues, because when she comes back, the next week we talk about how it went. And then we pick two more. But also, let's say that it didn't go as smooth as we thought, and that happens as you go farther along. Then you process any issues that may have occurred in the enactment process. Do we need to make any changes in the plan? She may have come up with some things, in addition to what we talked about. I think I need to add this to the list and put it at this point in the process. So how long would it take? You're right, I'm not sure based off of client issue, but I would say that in terms of building the plan, it shouldn't take longer than one or part of maybe one and part of the second session. And then you continue with that as they're building. What I've experienced with clients is, let's say there's 10 items on their list, they start having some trouble, maybe at item 5, it's harder, but so you work on encouragement, and as they start feeling better about embracing the process rather than the outcome, by the time they get to about the 7th place, they see that it's hard work and they can do the work, but they're ready to do it on their own, and so they can terminate. But it also depends on the issue. If it's a long-standing issue, there's going to be an interchange between using reflecting as if and doing some things that are a bit more dynamic.
Because they could actually get stuck somewhere in that process.
And then you would go back to looking at lifestyle, more of the earlier phases in the Adler process. So look at the Adler phases as cyclical, not linear. They look linear, but I think they're cyclical, because you go and you do insight and analysis and insight, and then you start doing the reflecting as if process, and then at some point they get stuck, and you go back and investigate the stuckness, and that could have to do with some lifestyle convictions that hadn't emerged at this point. And so you're working on those lifestyle convictions, insight phase, and then you're ready to continue with the reflecting as if part, and you might have to tweak the reflecting as if part as well. However, with some clients, and I love them, I almost do them for free, they come in and they're ready to go. They're at the late preparation, almost to action phase in Brzezinski and Orthodox model, and so you don't have to do that. So with those clients, lots of times I've said, how will your life be different if you no longer have this problem? And they'll tell me, and then I'll say, well, if you're acting as if you're that, what would that look like? What would you be doing different? So that would go right from the question to the reflecting as if, the as if question. That doesn't happen a whole lot, but it's really cool when it does, because then it's really brief therapy then. Big question, thanks. Yes, ma'am.
I had a little
concern about your adding the journaling to her process for the first time. It seemed like there were, you talked about a whole number of things in her life and things that she wanted to change and scaled them all. And I wondered for her whether adding the journaling the first time around was just going to be another thing that was going
Yeah,
to
and it could
feel
well
overwhelming.
be. It could well be. I did that because one of the drawbacks of doing a video is you try to do too much in the video, and it could well be that the journaling. In actuality, though, she did come back to my office not for a counseling session, but she started using this stuff because it was a real issue for her. It wasn't made up. She did keep a journal, and it was real helpful for her. However, if another client who was already feeling overwhelmed, and you're processing all this, and you give them another journal, it's really a case-by-case basis. And so I'm not disagreeing with you. In her case, it wasn't, but I think it was some cases it may well be. So it's a good point. When I am using reflecting as if, though, I do want them to start journaling pretty soon, because I want them to pay attention to be mindful of the process that's hindering them from enacting the reflecting as if behaviors. And so it may mean with some clients, rather than enacting 3 things for a week, they enact 2 or 1 and be able to keep a journal. But it's a good point. Yes, sir?
Do you think it's a danger of her when you gave her a sheet with all of the stuff on there? Do you think it's a danger of her jumping around on there? I mean, you gave her the specific things that she should do, like it was 1 or 2, but that she got all of these things on there. She may want to jump to 5 or jump to, start doing things outside of the specific instruction you gave her. Once she leaves you, she's got all this stuff.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that could be a danger?
It could be. I didn't do it on this video, and I probably should. But there's lots of stuff. If I'm sitting there watching the video, and I'm going, well, that sucked. I should. It's a clinical phrase. I would have. There was lots of a number of things I would have changed, but that's with every session. That's with all of us. But in the real world, when I use this, I talk to them. I tell them we start off with the ones that are easier to enact, so that we can get a footing for the future when it may get more difficult. So it's real important to do what so I kind of contract with her or him to do what we're about and agree to. Yeah, you give it to them. Even if I didn't give it to them, they probably could remember, and they could jump around. So it's real important to, in a sense, get them to agree to stay to the plan. Okay, good point. So,
Well, the other thing is if she skips around and she comes back, then you can say, how did that work for you?
yeah.
Because here was what you planned to do, and she tends not to get things done, so that would be a
Yeah.
teachable moment.
Right, because if it bites her on the posterior, another clinical phrase, by the way, then you could realize, because she may jump around as a alternative form of procrastination. Well, see, I can't do this. Well, you did number 5, and we may not be ready to do number 5. Go ahead, Sid.
Well, one of the things I've noticed with clients is when they don't follow through, sometimes it's because it's too much. And it's like, let's say the schedule for the week. If she got overwhelmed, that it was just too much to do, then the next time I say, okay, could you schedule for 3 days?
Right.
And do you think you could be successful at that? I think they fail sometimes because it's too much, but then I see it as we have to cut it down until I say baby steps. We have to cut it down to the baby steps, so she says, absolutely, I can do that.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And in fact, the early stuff is real easy. When they get up past 3 or 4, then we don't do more than 1 a week. We focus on 1, because they're probably, when you get in above that, they're probably not going to be able to do that one and complete it in a week. Some of it may take a month or so, but It's real important to be encouraging with them and help them learn to trust the process and not merely the outcome. So good point. Yes, ma'am. Oh, sir, I'm sorry. Sorry about that. I was thinking, I saw her. I saw the hand, I saw her. Yeah.
You mentioned Prochaska. To what extent, can you just talk briefly about to what extent Prochaska informs your decisions of how you approach this in terms of developing a to-do list?
Yeah, good point. Prochaska talks has 5 stages in it. Well, Prochaska, Norcross, and declemency. I mean, you can go on with all people. Has 5 stages in their stages change model that was originally created for working with substance abuse, but has subsequently been investigated and discovered that it works with a lot of clients. You have the pre-contemplation phase where people say, or stage, where people say, problem? I don't have a problem. She's got the problem. And so they're totally unaware of the problem. Then you got contemplation with, yeah, there may be a problem, but I'm okay. You know, I can quit anytime. You know, that kind of, they do acknowledge there's some kind of problem, but they're not ready to do anything about it. So you got pre-contemplation, contemplation, you got preparation. Preparation is where they say, yeah, there's a problem, and they've actually tried to make some changes on their own, but it's kind of hit and miss, but they're getting there. And then late preparation is where they're saying, okay, I got to do something, I need some help. And then they're ready for some action. And so to answer your question, when I have a sense they're ready to do something different and mean business, which is mid to late preparation, is when I use reflecting as if. The action phase is when they're actually doing stuff to make changes. And then the 5th phase is maintenance, is where they're maintaining, facilitating the gains that they've made in the therapeutic process. Where does most of the change occur? In session or out of session?
Out.
So what we should be about is preparing people to live in the real world, because the vast majority of change happens in the real world. And so it's real important to help them facilitate those gains and also leave the door open, because I think it's important that clients understand that they may need booster shots, just like we need booster shots and other things. And so I understand. And also how I frame time. I don't frame time in terms of weekly sessions. Weekly sessions in historical accident. In the medieval era, there were 2 types of clocks. One clock went this way, like we know it. The other clock, equal number of clocks, went this way, counterclockwise. It's a historical accident that we have clockwise clocks. People just happen to prefer that way. But it could easily have been, this could have been clockwise. And so I think weekly sessions were for the convenience of the therapist. Freud saw people every day. Adler saw people twice a week. And so with clients, depending on the client's issues, I may see a client 3 times in a week, and then I might not see him again for 2 weeks. And or another client I might see for 2 or 3 weeks in a row, and then I might not see him again for a month. It all depends on the client's issue. But Simon Budman talks about time-efficient therapy, and he's where I got this idea that depending on the client's issue, time is variable. It really depends on what the client needs. If it's an acute problem, I'm going to see them until I get them stabilized. And if they're in the action phase, then I'm going to give them some things to do, and then give them time to do it. And a week might not be enough. But in terms of reflecting as if, I typically do it for a weekly basis for the early ones until they get a sense of the snowball coming down. And then I might say, okay, for this next one, let me see you in 2 weeks. And that gives them a chance to embrace the process and have more time to actually get some of it done. That make sense? Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Sure. Yes, sir.
I'm curious about thinking in terms of specificity and concreteness. She said, eat more healthily. Boy, that's a big generalization.
Yeah.
I would be curious about what that means to her, particularly because food can be such a crazy obsession.
Yeah. Richard, yes. The question was, she mentioned about specificity. And in several other places, I talked her from general to specific. In that case, I didn't. The only thing I can think of is why I didn't ask her to tell me what that meant, eat more healthily, is I might have been cognizant of how much time I had left. But if in hindsight, I should have asked her that very question, what she said. What does it mean to eat more healthily? And tell me about what that means. Got her to be more specific. So yeah, you're right on target.
Richard, I have a question from one of our webinar people. Can I phrase that to you?
Okay.
Is that okay?
I wouldn't do it. That's okay. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Do clients feel that this process is too repetitive in terms of reflective as if throughout the session?
That's not been my experience. My experience is that it was repetitive with her because she kept giving generalities, and I would be reminding her to go from general to specific. Also, you have to kind of repeat the questions to get them to move on to different areas. So it's not been my experience in clients. I've experienced it as repetitive. I mean, with any technique that you use that you have to move them along in a process, there's going to be some repetition of the language. So it's not been my experience. Yes.
I think that an example of that, answering in the negative, is that when they're talking about eating more healthily, you really didn't get a chance to expound on that, and she gave the 3. So it almost would trigger me to say that might be a real problem with her, even separate sessions for it.
Is that a question or?
Well, I guess it's an observation that, and like he was saying, some people saw it as repetitive. It's almost like you could take that out of there.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like you really covered it in depth over and over. You kind of missed that one.
Well, there's several of them that I didn't take. For example, I could have gone to lifestyle convictions about perfectionism, but I was there to demonstrate reflecting as if. And so I could have gone with the eating. I could have gone with her issues about perfectionism and her how she learned to excuse herself from doing well by waiting to the last minute, and then she could tell herself, well, if I would have had more time, I could have done a better job. And so that's often what people that procrastinate with perfectionism is they're able to make an excuse for it because they, I'm not saying that with her, but that's often with people, they're able to excuse their work because they didn't have enough time. So I can think of 10 things off the top of my head could have been pulled out for different sessions, but I was on the video. I'm demonstrating reflecting as if, and so that's why I stayed focused on reflecting as if. Yes.
Could you please repeat instructions for journaling?
I'm sorry.
What instructions you gave her for journaling?
It's in the cab, taking a cab that I explained earlier. And then I'm going to send you all the PowerPoint. It's where having her look at, well, there's 2 points to the, one's the cab, and also when she starts feeling like she's going to procrastinate and put things off, I would ask her, okay, what are the feelings that you feel when you have a sense you want to put things off? What are you doing that could either be in the process of procrastinating or lead to procrastination? And then what are you telling yourself? And typically, based off of what I got from this session is she's probably telling herself, well, it's not going to be good enough, why bother? And so she'll start doing other things other things that are good things, but it's not the best thing. The best thing would be to follow through with the assignments she needs to do on her schedule, rather than doing other things that give her an excuse for not doing what she needed to do. Does that make sense? And she'd follow the ABC process in the journal. Other questions? All right, well, thanks for coming.